but at the very least, you can agree that it would be a better system than one based on money.
How are we going to fix, what's broken here to reflect the betterment of society if the will of the people isn't the vehicle to do that with?
Well, before we get into democracy, first I'll talk about something you said that I think I very much agree with is the scale, the metric for the hierarchy is your financial status and your political persuasion. Now, is this the way that you should structure a society? And I'm going to say no. If we want to have like an actually good, successful society that people want to live in, I think your metric for success, right, should be a certain moral metric, right? How well you can live up to your duties and obligations as a moral person. And
could you elaborate on that? What do you mean as far as your moral obligations? What do you think that those are?
Well, in my opinion, which you may very much disagree with, right? You have duty to God, duty to nation, duty to family, right? These are things that are
Is that the order?
Sometimes nation and family can be a little bit mixed up, but duty to God always comes first.
The reason why I ask that is because generally I hear like hierarchy prescribed. It's like God over family and then family over country, essentially. Some people obviously reorganize that pyramid, but I do think that if you are a Christian, then that's a fairly good way to organize your life, actually. You should be taking your main instructions from what you believe to be prescriptive from the Holy Book, and then generally like prescribe that to your family, which then in turn like interacts with society and then hopefully changes it in the way that you see fit and godly. So what you're laying out, I agree with the premise. Obviously that's not how I would organize society, but I can see where you're getting at with that. Sorry, that was a little bit of a sidetrack.
Well, but at the very least, you can agree that it would be a better system than one based on money, because I would see if you set money as your metric, it's almost going to be inversely related to your ability to be moral, right? You see people who collect wealth, right? They are typically cutthroat, immoral people. And if you're going to have a hierarchy that is based on how much money you have, you're going to have, sociopathic, cutthroat assholes coming to the top of that hierarchy. And you're going to, that's going to trickle down into creating an amoral society.
Do you think that capitalism plays into that?
Very much so. I mean,
oh, okay, got it.
I'm not a capitalist.
So. Yeah, I was about to say, generally when I hear somebody say that they're like far right nowadays, I assume that they're not a capitalist. I generally assume that they generally have like a little bit more of a prescriptive view of society and the economy, and that there are better things than just like, like corporatism and stuff like that. I understand the viewpoint. But I actually think that money is surprisingly effective at certain things. I think that it was in the movie Wolf on Wall Street, he said you can save the spotted owl with money. And there are a lot of things that you can do with the accumulation of wealth that are surprising and can even be moral. So I don't think that just in general that the acquisition of wealth is necessarily immoral. It's generally like your worship of money and what you do with it that can be immoral. But I don't think that that's just necessarily like the worst thing in the world. But I do agree that there are better spiritual ideals to chase after. And one of those is family, which I think that a lot of people in America find a lot of comfort in and find like a home base, like something that's generally like something that makes sense in a hierarchical structure. That's a hard word to say. Holy shit. So what I would say there is that it kind of has to be a balance, because if you don't have resources to take care of your family, you don't have any of that capital that you can acquire in the marketplace, you generally can't take care of your family. I can't think of another way to structure family unless you have access to things like capital, unless you have access to things like markets and resources. So sometimes I wonder, like, how do you reconcile those two things? How do you reconcile like the need to keep like family generally pure of the market forces versus like you existing here and needing to partake in those things in order to, provide for your family?
Well, it's a very tough question in the sense that, if you watch my last debate, I'm very anti-technology, but here I am using technology.
I feel really bad. I didn't see it. I'm sorry, buddy.
Oh, don't worry about that. But yeah, it's you do have to it's almost a cost benefit analysis, right? As much as I hate the system, because I have certain obligations and certain duties that I need to fulfill, I'm going to have to participate in the system. And then you're almost getting into game theory, right? Would we, me as an individual, I have to do what's best for me, therefore I will participate, even though it would be much better for the group if many of us chose not to participate, instead do something different. Which is why it is important, you need to get ideas out there. You need to convince as many people to a position before you can just go out and start building things, leave society and make your commune or your ethno-state or whatever your society of choice would be.
Wouldn't you argue, though, that markets would be the best platform of which to like spread that message?
Well, we can see that markets can do a good job, but they can also do just as good of a job at suppressing a message, right? I mean, how hard is it to, once again, we're not going based on moral or even merit, right? Is it meritocracy? I mean, Fox News is the most watched cable news station in the country, right?
True.
Tucker Carlson is the single most watched man in the country, and yet, the Republican Party still can't compete with this massive media complex, despite the fact that if you're looking at it purely from a meritocratic perspective, they are doing their job the best that they possibly could be, right? They are the most.
I agree with that, actually. And I'm just saying this because I think a lot of lefties don't give any ground to this one. I do think that Fox News is the biggest cable news network, and that should not be undervalued as far as like their influence in society. But I am not going to pretend like that is the same thing as what the collective of most media, which I do think is fairly antagonistic towards the conservative movement. So I do sympathize with that. And that's one thing, if I was going to say like we should fix in society, it should be that there is more access to platforms for just about everybody who has an opinion. I know that we like talk about this umbrella of misinformation, which negatively affects society, which is actually one of the things that I think was one of my arguments in the opposite direction of hierarchies, because generally when we talk about like how information is prescribed, if there is a hierarchy to that, I'm afraid that that system could get very corrupted. I actually like the fact that there is a Fox News, that there's an MSNBC, that there are like various forms of information. And sure, some of them are more popular or have a greater reach than others, but I am just glad that there is a marketplace where you can actually go to find the information that you want. And if you want to hear what's going on the opposite side, there is like a fairly reliable corporate news network that actually like let me just sidetrack and say I don't believe in the hypodermic needle theory of media. I don't believe that you just watch media, you immediately like are injected with the prescriptions they're giving you. I generally think that media is a product of the needs of society. People who partake in media do it for a reason. They were looking for something and then they sought it out and they found it. So that's generally like how I view like the media landscape. And I'm glad that there are a lot of things in the market that you can kind of, find your particular intellectual fancy with. But you are totally right. And I think it would be really foolish of any lefty to not cede ground. That's outside. I'm sorry. This happens every single day here. And so, yeah, I do agree that you guys need more access. So then the next question is, what do we do? Do we prescribe laws that fix this, or is it a radical reconstruction of society that would get us equal access to information and platforming?
Well, so this is where you can't let the market hierarchy, right? You have this once again, this is sort of a mixing of the caste, right? You have a merchant class, right, where they should be dedicated to trading and making as much profit as possible, right? That is the MO of their caste, right? But now that you have a merchant caste that is dominating society, now your entire society is money based and trade based, instead of if who it should be is led by your philosopher king, right? It should be morality based, philosophy based, truth based. So you need
How
to
would we
separate
bring that
out.
about in American society? Sorry to cut you off.
Well, that's not going to be easy, right? That's going to take very radical change. You
Sure.
need to, as far as it goes, the system of capitalism, right, needs to be even slowly taken out, right? You need to, and you can have intermediate steps to this. You could take some type of third positionist type movement, a type of fascism where you have your ruling class, right? They come to power and they sort of take over the market. They say, or the market is going to be allowed to exist, but we're going to exert a certain amount of authority over it. And then you can sort of start shaping the market to reflect the morality of your state, right? Whatever the philosophy is that you're going to subscribe to. If you're going to
America's a pretty diverse tapestry, though. Do you think that that would actually like work, or we'd have like trust in a system like that for hierarchies?